Her palm slams the cafeteria table. The untouched bowl of soup shudders, lifts, and edges itself to the rim as if being pushed away. Gravity hiccups. 3 heavy drops hang, widen, then drift upward toward her wrist before the plate tips, flinging them backward in a slow, wrong arc. The spill recoils, drips back into the bowl without a splash, and the air tastes faintly of copper, like something very wrong just paused. The clatter settles. Around her, the lunchroom hums with habitual rhythm. Trays slide into the hands of buddies swapping halves of sandwiches. Lunch monitors call names as plastic forks scrape containers, and ceiling fans turn with predictable patience. A girl a few rows over laughs loudly, just loud enough to sound normal. And a boy adjusts his headphones without bothering the world beyond the table. The soup, now at rest, steams faintly while she scoops it carefully, eyes ahead, as if the air still belonged to gravity and not to that tiny rebellion. She breathes in and out with the same cadence she's kept since middle school. Inhale, count slowly, release, and reaches for bread without glancing at the spill. Everyone moves in loops learned long ago. No one mentions anything out of place. The world stays flat. The room's sky remains untroubled, and the cafeteria clock ticks forward in measured seconds, its hands never quite moving faster than the murmurs of the crowd. Chairs slide across linoleum as the survivors stack them in 2 neat arcs around the peeling whiteboard. Mara wipes smudges off the center table with the edge of her sleeve, while Lila thumbs through the registration sheet. Every time someone walks in, their eyes dart to the paper, then away. Fingers hovering above pens, breaths held. The room smells of reheated coffee and candle wax. Mara hears it again in how the new volunteer, Nick, stiffens when they're told a simple check-in question. The room goes quiet. The pen hovers above a name, then drops, as though the shame in admitting, "I'm still here," were contagious. Ari slips in moments later with a canvas tote. She sets it down with a thud. The bag bangs give rhythm to her breath. Alex sent another message, she says before closing the door, voice low but taut. Someone glances toward the window where the late afternoon sun lifts dust motes. He needs a ride to the intake meeting, Ari adds, fingers tightening on the tote strap. But he's stuck at the warehouse, so I have to go after this. No one argues. Lila's jaw ticks. She clears her throat and keeps folding flyers. Mara drags a marker across a poster titled "Stories in Light." As she draws the final letter, Ari reaches for a stack of pamphlets and hesitates. "Do you want me to take these into the back?" she asks, loyalty pulsing like she is guarding something. "You promised last time." Lila snaps without raising her head. "It's our only table, Ari. You can't keep leaving us short-handed because you're waiting on him to call." Ari's shoulders drop a fraction, then pull up again. "He keeps going back to work after this stuff," she murmurs. "He doesn't want me to look weak in front of the crew." The room holds its breath, as if the very walls want to keep her from stepping out. Jules, who had been pouring bracelets into a bowl, sets them down. "We can't fix the room if nobody sits at the table," she says, looking straight at Ari. "People came tonight thinking they could talk. They keep staring at their hands because they already decided they're the problem. Shame is a wall at the door, and they don't even know it's there." The roar of the city outside leaks through the cracked window. Someone laughs, but it is thin. Ari drags a foot against the linoleum, then steps toward the shelf, takes a breath, and places the pamphlets on a platter of cookies. "I'll stay," she offers. "I can be here when they come in. They can sit with me." Lila glances up, the corner of her mouth twitching as if relief peeks through. The air shifts again when the first survivors trickle toward the table. Ari stands near the entrance, palms open, not glancing at her phone. She greets each arrival, half hugs, nods, short sentences. And when Mara approaches, Ari meets her eyes briefly, letting a tiny crack show. "Tell them about the lapse," Mara whispers. "Shame doesn't have to be the rule if we let the next voice say it aloud." Ari nods, the earlier loyalty softened fear giving way to something else. She leans in, voice almost a whisper. "Maybe tonight I'll tell them I'm still in the hallway. I'll say it even if it scares me." The first circle forms. The lights dim as people sit, some with knees shaking, some with heads low. Mara cues the opening prompt. Ari, still near the door, opens it wider as another survivor stands at the threshold. Nick steps in, and the pen finally touches paper without trembling. The room hums with the release of small truths finally spoken aloud. And the shame that once was a silent shroud creaks under the weight of these voices. The circle breathes together, ready to take the next step. One where shame is seen, and no longer the private background music, even if no one yet says the word. Ari stands by the folding table the way she always did. Name tags splayed like a tide pool of bright cards. She doesn't leave the doorway. Her hand hovers near the latch even as she offers the latest newcomer, Lila, a clipboard and a smile that still trembles. Lila's fingers shake, but Ari's voice is steady. "We've got you." And when Lila steps inside, Ari gestures toward the circle with a slight nod. The registration table behind her is almost empty. Mara has already shoved the leftover brochures into a box. And the hallway is punctuated only by the muffled chatter from inside. Inside, survivors pull up chairs around the center table. Dr. Mara and Theo already have 2 sheets spread out. One titled Codependent Expectations with sticky notes, another titled Shame Voices. Mara taps the card marked, "No one leaves me alone," then slides it across the table toward the group. "Write down the expectation that kept you frozen," she says. "Then tell us who said it." Softly, as if that voice is right there. Every movement counts. The cards rustle, pens scratch. Ari sits on the edge of a chair instead of the bench now assigned to her, glancing down the corridor where Alex still hovers near the front desk. She doesn't move, but her fingers tap once on the table in time with the voices. The first confession is quiet but steady. "He told me not to speak unless he asked," says Mara's volunteer Janelle, eyes on the laminated card. "Every time I reached for a word, the shame guilt pressed me back. I kept smiling because he equated my silence with loyalty." Dr. Mara nods, touches the shame voices sheet and says, "I hear the same rhythm. If you talk, you're disloyal." That's the control voice, shaded now into your shame. No analysis, just the observation that the shame matches the command. Lila stands, clutching her own sticky note. Her legs wobble, but she doesn't sit back down. "He said I was weak when I asked for help, then accused me of abandoning him when I didn't." Her breath catches, and someone slides a spare chair closer. Ari reaches out and lets Lila rest her palm on the chair's back. The touch is small, but it keeps the table from tilting. "I hid my anger," Lila keeps going, "because he'd say, 'Anger means you want to leave me.' I practiced not wanting, so my shame learned to settle in the silence." Theo steps forward, placing a gentle palm on the board. "The shame sounds like the controlling script," he says, mirroring the command, the guilt, the fear. When it whispers, the body remembers how the relationship used the same cadence to keep you in place. The room hums, not with analysis, but with the exchange of truth. When Lila takes her seat, the tension breaks slightly. Collective exhale, a round of nods, a soft hand squeezing hers. Ari leans forward and says, I noticed my throat tighten at the door, which draws a few quiet chuckles and a ripple of shared understanding. Someone murmurs, "That was the shame on the registration table again." The group acknowledges it together, and Mara quickly writes, "Name it to unglue it," on another note, then hands Lila a pen. Whenever it resurfaces, Mara says, say its name out loud. It's the same voice, just in a different room. The mini payoff is immediate. When the next newcomer arrives, the circle is already rising, their voices ready, and the registration table is no longer a barrier, but a watchful spot where someone meets the comers with a steady look. Ari offers her own clipboard, more confidently this time. The survivors, now armed with confessions that connect shame to the control they lived under, sit a little straighter, ready to keep naming it. Jamie hangs back by the registration table, fingers tightening around the clipboard as Mara gestures toward the circle. The room smells faintly of coffee and spray cleaner. The fluorescent lights hum above. Survivors keep watching Jamie with open faces, but none push. Ari shifts her weight, eyes darting between Mara and the newcomer, then takes a step forward. "Hey," Ari says, voice low enough for Jamie to hear. "I can just sit with you while the others wrap up. No pressure." Jamie jerks, then nods once, shoulders collapsing as if a weight finally lands on them. They sit on the folding chair beside Ari, elbows on knees. Ari offers the clipboard. Jamie sets it down without writing, fingers tracing the edge. The shame in their posture shows. They never speak over the clip of murmured encouragement drifting from the circle. Ari doesn't rush them. Theo calls the group back together. "We keep the truth clock at 55, he says, sweeping his gaze gently. "Halfway lit, strong enough to see but not to burn you. Share what you can, and the listener honors that limit." The circle opens again. Mara nods toward Jamie. "You can use the middle if you want," she says. "Just say one sentence to start." Jamie inhales sharply, then blurts, "I keep myself quiet so no one sees how needy I am." The words land like stone. The room goes still for a heartbeat. Not silence of avoidance, but the crisp pause of everyone waiting to respond. Ari leans in, thumbs drumming on her knees. "I used to think needing help made me a burden," she says. "Then I watched you all stay when I couldn't stop trembling." Her voice stays steady. "So I'm staying now too." Jamie looks at her, tears threatening but not falling. "It feels dangerous to say it out loud," they mumble. "Dangerous sounds like pain," Mara replies. "And pain wants to hide. Let the names of the voices out so they shrink." Jamie swallows. The voice says I'm too weak to be here. That sharing will prove I'm worthless. Theo leans forward slightly. "And what does the room say back?" Sam, the newcomer who arrived last week, speaks. "It says you're brave enough to speak it now." His hands are flat on his thighs, fingers tapping a rhythm as if to keep the pace of the group steady. Jamie lets out a ragged breath, shoulders uncoiling. The tension breaks into a ripple of nervous laughter when Leon quietly adds, "And the voice is wrong because you're here, even if you want to bolt." Jamie nods, eyes glossy. "I could leave," they whisper, "but I didn't." Ari squeezes Jamie's wrist, gentle, grounding. "We noticed the freeze, Jamie. Now notice this. You stayed, and we noticed. That's a crack in the shame." Jamie looks around the circle, then down at their hands. "It still feels heavy," they admit, "but it's lighter than it was." Jamie sets the clipboard aside and leans back, shoulders lower. Mara smiles softly, then glances at Theo. "Truth visibility at 55 isn't a failure," Theo says. "It's a platform. We see the shame enough to say its name and still choose the room." Jamie laughs, a short sound, relief and disbelief mixing. "Thank you," they murmur, and the group answers with nods, murmuring support, their voices rising just enough to vibrate the air with a shared sense of holding. Ari releases Jamie's wrist slowly, then stands. "I'll help the next person at the table," she tells Mara. "I'll keep showing up." Mara gives her a small nod, and Ari moves toward the door, the light catching her face as if she's been carved out of something bright. Jamie stays seated, gaze softening. "It was getting harder to breathe before I said anything," they say. "Now it's easier." The air seems a degree lighter. Survivors begin quietly pairing off for tasks. The registration table hums again as Ari approaches with a new binder, offering a smile no longer clipped by fear. The registration table has become a ritual. Colored sticky notes taped along the edge, each carrying a self-talk rewrite. Theo hands Ari another stack, neat statements already half-scribbled in her hand. "Say it aloud," he prompts, "not in your head." Ari inhales, then says, "I can set the pace, even if others shout over me." The survivors nod, the words landing heavier than air. Jamie squeezes a marker between their fingers, then, before the next newcomer arrives, writes "My yes matters," and tears the strip free. Dr. Mara steps into the center circle, palms flat on the table. "Remember, truth visibility now sits at 7, she says, and the numbers on the whiteboard flicker nearer the marker line. She moves a metal cart closer, setting down a box of laminated cards labeled with actions. Pause, breathe, reframe. State the limit. Invite a calm partner. She taps the box. Choose one. Use it when your shame voice clicks on the record player again. You don't switch it off all at once, but you can skip a track. Healing is a steady walk, so take a guaranteed step, not a leap. A step. A knock at the door. The handle rattles. Jamie glances toward Ari, who has been keeping watch near the doorway, her foot still angled to the table. A woman, Lena, peeks inside, hugging a tote. "I can stay," she begins, her voice trailing as 3 other survivors stand, forming a loose arc. Ari lowers herself onto the bench closest to the entrance, the bench between Lena and the hall. "There's a 30-minute window to catch up," she says, keeping her voice even. "You can take a seat, but we all agreed to give each other a reminder. No fast fixes. We'll start when the circle can hold everyone." Lena hesitates, eyes flicking across the clustered bodies. Her shoulders slump. She steps further in, then stops when Theo raises a palm. "Name what you hear before you move," he says. "It's okay to say, 'I'm anxious,' before I sit down." Lena swallows, the words thick, and whispers, "Shame says I'll be rejected if I wait." Jamie flips one of her cards face up. Reframe. Waiting strengthens me. The tension cracks. The group releases a collective breath, and Lena slides onto the bench next to Ari, who gently pats the empty space between them. "We'll go step by step," Ari says. And Lena nods once, her fingers fidgeting with the tote strap. The session starts as Theo hands each survivor a card with a boundary practice written in short sentences. I pause when my shoulders curl. I say no and redirect. I ask for clarification. They read them aloud and then pair off. Alex and Jamie lie back on the mats, taking turns repeating the boundary phrase while the other touches their arm in a grounding press. Theo circulates, placing a hand on a shoulder, then moving on. The room fills with the sound of voices lifting without strain, a murmur that feels like release. Afterward, with the tension finally settling, Mara gathers everyone near the sign-in board. She says, "It wasn't a single breakthrough today. It was 10 small ones. Ari keeping the door, Jamie writing her boundary, Lena naming the shame voice. She nods toward the whiteboard, where a new sticky note now reads, "Self-acceptance is the base of every next step." The survivors clap quietly. The sound is small but sharp, a payoff for all that steady effort. The hall hums with the scrape of chairs and the sharp scent of citrus candles. Survivors move in a practiced rhythm, each pair of hands pressing a mark onto paper, then folding it into a pale triangle. Theo taps the whiteboard. The number 85 glows in neon marker. "Truth at 85, he says, his voice steady. "We can see more of ourselves now." He slides a bucket to the center of the rug, already filled with river stones and cedar sprigs. Ari steps up with a stack of ribbon strips and a basket of pens. "Write the thing that's been saying you need outside validation," she calls, eyes on the newcomer still hovering near the doorway. The room stills, then bursts into movement. Theo leans in, not to speak for him, but to mirror breathing. Ari taps her own chest, then points at Kai. "Say it again. I matter when I see it myself." He swallows, then shouts, "I matter when I see it myself." The ribbon snaps taut as he forces the knot. Joy runs through the room as the water hiss dies down. Lena, now standing between Mara and Ari, reaches for Kai's shoulder. "You proved it with the stone," she says, turning toward the circle. "Shame doesn't get to keep us stuck at the table anymore." A ripple of affirmations, lighter now, like exhaled laughter, builds as each survivor names one way they're choosing safety over shame. The ritual turns toward release. Theo raises the bucket. "Light the cedar, then toss your stone in. The ashes stay here. The rules they enforced? We leave them in the flame." One by one, participants drag the stones through the ember glow and, with a crisp motion, drop them into the fire. When the last stone disappears, the flame flickers, then steadies, keeping the room warm. A reward blooms. A chorus of claps. A collective lean of shoulders toward one another. Jamie steps up beside Ari, handing out cups of tea steeped in ginger and honey. She turns to the circle, raising her cup. "To our worth. No signatures required." Glass tips, a tiny cheer rises, and the watchful silence that once froze new people at the registration table is replaced by a wave of hands knitting together. Kai, shoulders relaxed, stays near the doorway, but doesn't retreat. He offers to sit with the next person in line, repeating, "I'll listen, no judgment." The line forms differently now. People take their time, then step in when they're ready. Not because some invisible standard demands it. The room is noisy, active, finally feeling safe without the old chains. The morning light slices through the front window, catching the new corkboard of handwritten story prompts that survivors rearranged last night. Ari stands at the table with the binder marked "Story Walk," laying out 3 index cards with names and specific shame moments. Door handles left untouched, voices silenced. Jamie leans in, pointing to the arrows painted on the floor that guide new arrivals from the door to the circle. "We start with the moment the shame voice says, 'Leave,'" Jamie tells the room, tapping the arrow. "Then we name it out loud and keep walking. That's what keeps the door from feeling like a trap." Their hands move fast. Their choices: who speaks first, which name goes on the card, feel deliberate. Each a tiny refusal to let old habits rush back in. Ari lifts her head, the same doorway tension in her shoulders. But her voice pulls steady. "When I was new, I told myself I didn't matter because he refused to look me in the eye," she says, flipping to the page that records that night. "Then I chose to stay by this table instead of stepping out. That door used to be the end of the line. Today I choose to keep it open, even if my pulse races." She slides the binder toward the doorway, fingers brushing the welcome mat as if to anchor it. Just as she finishes, the door swings wider and Morgan freezes in the frame. The eagle tattoo on their wrist clenches, their coat half turned toward the parking lot. "I can just—" Morgan starts, words bubbling up but stuck between the hinges. The room quiets as everyone watches Ari take 2 steps forward. "Morgan," Ari says softly, but her eyes stay on the hallway. "Come in. You can keep carrying what you brought, but you don't have to carry it alone. Let us be the ones to notice it. The shame voice that says to leave. Name it now. We'll name it with you." Morgan looks at the floor, lip bitten, and the air tightens. Tension sharp enough that someone taps the table twice to break it. Jamie lifts a mug of coffee and places it in Morgan's hands, their fingers brushing. "When I first heard my voice say I was useless, I grabbed this same handle and nearly ran," they say. "Then Lena came up to me and said, 'Your voice isn't the end of my door. Come sit.'" Jamie nods toward the circle. "That made me choose to stay. That's the kind of story we want to hand to you today." The words are simple, direct. An offering, a mini payoff that makes Morgan glance up. The shame voice twitches again. Morgan's shoulders start to pivot toward the parking lot. But Theo steps in, sliding a chair into place right at the entrance. "We've got room right there," he says, pointing to the teal chair. "Sit with the people who named it loud enough for everyone to hear." Morgan lets out a breath that fogs the glass for a second, then releases the handle. They take the chair, the movement deliberate. The room exhales with them. As Morgan settles, Kai lifts a stone from the release basket and sets it beside them. "You don't have to cast it into the fire today, but you can tell us what it weighs," Kai says, voice steady. Morgan's lips shift into a half smile, and the tension in their jaw loosens. They begin to describe the shame, the exact words it uses, and the circle leans in. Ari, eyes still on the door, nods toward the story walk board. "When people walk by and see what we share, the door stops being a wall and becomes a promise," she says. "That's why I choose to keep naming these moments every Monday." The announcement lands, a mini payoff for the entire group. A newcomer stayed, a story is entered, and the decision to stay open continues, shaping every small choice as they welcome the next footsteps. Flames lick the cedar-smoked stones, and the circle exhales as each voice, once frozen, now rings around the fire. Kai's declaration still hangs warm in the air, unshakable, while Lena's careful naming of shame settles like rain on thirsty ground. Ari, stationed beyond the doorway, keeps her hand on the storywalk binder, her own tremor folded into an invitation that no longer requires proof. Jamie leans toward her, the two of them bracing the threshold with shared presence. So arrivals find steady breath instead of silence. Morgan, who had almost slipped away, now sits against the wall, the shame voice named and uninvited. And the circle welcomes them with that same steady boundary practice. The stones go into the flame one by one. Each discard a quiet declaration, each ember a promise that the shame will not be the story's end. Outside, the night holds back, waiting for no one. Inside, the survivors hold their places, anchored not by fear, but by the weight of their own worth.